we see a growing number of young people, mostly in their early and mid-20s, sometimes later, who believed themselves to be transgender at some point in their life. A lot of them thought they were trans starting around their teenage years. They pursued some sort of a transition, whether it's a social transition or aspects of a medical transition, and then come to realize at some point later down the line that transition did not give them what they were expecting, did not solve their problems, and it did not alleviate their discomfort.
I felt like all these success stories were out there that this whole time, why was I not doing it right? Why was I not experiencing this euphoria long-term, this sense of control over my body? Why was everything out of control? Why was I not fixed? And when I was reading the stories of these detransitioned women, I realized it's because transitioning can't fix you. I was trying to fix myself by changing my body when I really needed to fix the world around me. I felt wronged, and I felt like I needed to completely separate myself from transgender identity because that's not what I needed. That's not what was going to make me healthy and make me have a decent life. I was going to make myself healthy, and I was going to make myself have a decent life by addressing the abuse and the mistreatment that I had experienced as a woman.
On August 27th, 2013, I was just looking around on the internet, and I ran across the radical feminist blogs, especially the Gender Trender blog. And for the first time, I learned that children were being transed. And also that the male trans activists were saying the most horrible, violent things to women, and that they were arrogating to themselves everything of women's and trying to take over women's camps. And this was a real shock to me. And I knew immediately that I could not have anything to do with it. I did not want to be associated with anything about transgenderism at all.
Approximately 85% of children and adolescents with gender dysphoria will have resolution of their distress feelings if they are allowed to go through normal puberty. The majority of those children and adolescents will be lesbian, gay, or bisexual as adults. And it's my opinion and the opinion of others that halting puberty interferes with the natural developmental process that allows an individual to gain acceptance of their body. And the way that I like to state this is that puberty is not a disease. Puberty is actually part of the solution for children and adolescents with gender dysphoria.
I think the best picture of desistance statistics comes from a review Dr. Ken Zucker did, and he presented it at US Path. In his PowerPoint presentation, he reviewed the 4 more recent and best studies on childhood gender dysphoria, and he found a desistance rate of 67%. also seeing many, many stories of teenagers, mostly teenage girls, who are identifying as trans, who would fall under being diagnosed under the current DSM criteria. They are dysphoric for more than 6 months, often up to years, even in their tweens and teens. And then they are completely outgrowing gender dysphoria. So they are going to look like an official case to a therapist and a doctor who are now giving them hormone blockers and testosterone, often with very little mental health assessment.
As soon as I quit the testosterone, I got so sick that I had lost 50 pounds in the matter of 2 months. So it was a miserable, miserable time. My mom took me to the ER numerous times because we thought I was probably not going to make it.
I was on cross-sex hormones for over 5 years. So my body had become reliant upon testosterone. And then wanting to go off of it without any sort of guidance, let alone chemical support or even natural support. I only recently learned about supplements that I can use to assist with menopausal symptoms. So none of this was given to me.
A lot of weird stuff happened when I stopped taking hormones. It actually changed a lot, and you don't realize how much of your hormones make up your chemical structure. Just because when I had quit, I had actually become allergic to shellfish, and I had never been allergic to them before. I could become allergic to hazelnut, just some really weird things because they had to run a blood test on me because I was having so many issues every day for a while. It's thankfully gotten a little bit better at the time I've been off the hormones, but I still have constant intestinal issues. I have severe IBS. I have to take daily medications for it. I have to take estrogen now daily.
If a woman has taken testosterone at male dosages for several months, there will be effects on her body. If that woman then decides to stop testosterone, if she has not had surgery to remove her ovaries, it's likely that her ovaries will actually restart estrogen production. Now, if she's had her ovaries removed, she would need to take supplemental estrogen to replace those levels back to normal. The long-term effects of that hormonal switch is really not well understood. Estrogen should not be perceived as a reversal, having the capacity to reverse the effects of testosterone.
Being in this kind of limbo in terms of, which restrooms you can use and all of those other practical things. And I can kind of understand why some women might decide that just continuing to live as a trans man is the best thing for them. I think with support and with a therapeutic relationship to journey with somebody to journey with you through this process, I think it is possible to face these difficulties in a way that's really liberating. But having said that, I also, as I said, I have the utmost compassion for people who feel that it's too difficult and who decide that they will just continue living as a trans man.
I lost a lot of friends just from telling them that I was choosing to go off of cross-sex hormones. I, at the time, was not political at all. I wasn't even coming out as detransitioned socially. I just told them, hey, I had these negative effects, so I'm going off of hormones. I was told that I was a traitor. I was threatened consistently. I had to stop seeing my therapist at the time because a friend of mine threatened to come and find me at my therapist office and cause me harm. I just went through this crazy social experience of everyone I knew abandoning me, and all for the sake of me taking control over my health.
For the young people, it's really hard for them, because most of them as young people were very social and had a lot of friends, and especially when they've had surgery and their voices are deep, they're growing beards and what have you. And they were really into it as a group of friends and so on. So I can't even imagine how bad that is for them, because they really had to give it all up and face a lot of just fury from their former friends and trans activists, and it's just really awful.
Detransitioners who talk publicly about their experiences, whether that's in real life or online, will often receive a lot of vitriol. People think that if you're a detransitioner, it must mean that you're really transphobic, that you're trying to prevent other people from transitioning, that you hate trans people. There can be a lot of really vicious attacks on detransitioners. And remember that they're already a somewhat isolated, marginalized group, because they were part of an isolated, marginalized group when they were trans, but at least they have the other people who were also trans supporting them. And now when they step out of that, now they're really a tiny minority at this point. They are supporting each other. There is a growing community of detransitioners, and that's really lovely to see. But in terms of the wider society, in some places, people are not even that familiar with what transgender means. But, I think in many places, most people at least have some idea of that by now. But really out there, most people have never heard of detransition. And so if you're trying to kind of explain who you are and maybe why you present the way you do and saying I'm a detransitioner, people don't even understand what that means. So it is can be a very lonely, difficult road to walk to.
One part of the narrative of the trans lobby is that there's a very low regret rate for this treatment. It works, and the regret rate is around 1%, and that's from studies. They're not very robust studies. They're old, and they are mostly concerned with older, late transitioning men. We actually have no information about this recent cohort over the last decade of children who are having these treatments at ages as young as 10, because they haven't grown up yet. So we have no idea. But that's a big part of how this treatment has been sold as beneficial and necessary.
I used to be in charge of the adult service. I had to produce outcomes for every patient that was seen in my service. Now, the fact that you've got this controversial service and the medical director said there's no follow-up of these kids, which is quite remarkable in itself.
We don't know how many children will regret. The only thing we have really in this country, the only indication is a statement made by Lord Robert Winston. He gets a lot of young people coming into his fertility clinics, and these are the people who have frozen eggs and sperm, who, in other words, had reached a stage of puberty, which is, I think, around Tanner stage 4, where they do produce eggs and sperm and freeze them for future fertility. The issue here is that children are being given puberty blockers at Tanner stage 2 of puberty, where they haven't yet developed any fertility, but also that most children do not go through that process of freezing eggs and sperm. They don't want to come off puberty blockers in order for their body to produce eggs or sperm, and they don't want to go through that process of freezing. It's a really uncomfortable process to extract eggs for girls in particular. So Robert Winston had children who were probably on puberty blockers at a later age, not the 10-year-olds, not the 12-year-olds, the 16-year-olds he would have been seeing in his clinic. And these young people were devastated at not being able to have their own children, and they felt extremely damaged. And there was a regret rate of young women who'd regretted having double mastectomies.
Any risks and dangers that we are already seeing, and then potential risks that we should worry about, are being censored not only by gender activist extremists who threaten people, who dox people, who go after people's families and jobs, but this is also being censored by major institutions.
The topic of the experiences of people who detransition is very important. You know, people have come out and have explained their life experiences, their lived experiences with this. And there's very little research about this. And this is important because if you think about any medical intervention, why wouldn't you want to know all of the outcomes? You know, in what other world would there be, or what other scenario would there be when someone says, oh, we've got this technique for something, we only want to hear the good outcomes. We are not interested if you had an allergic reaction. We are not interested if you had an infection. We are not interested if you're dissatisfied in any way. That seems surprising to me, that why this should be an issue, that why is there pushback?
Scientific journals don't usually care about what some activist who's not even in a university, not even a scientist, would say, but in this case they pandered to these activists. And so anybody seeing that would say, I don't want to do research on this. And certainly in Britain we have James Caspian, who was a psychotherapist who wanted to do research for his master's thesis on people detransitioning because he'd seen it in his own practice. And the university, which I think was Bath Spa University, refused, didn't allow him to actually study this because they said it might harm. You know, if he found out the wrong things, it might harm the reputation of the university. So that's a very tangible example of how research gets stifled.
You cannot just say, oh, this topic is an idea that is a doctrine in my head, and because it is a doctrine in my head, other people should not even research that. No. You have to do the research, and you have to analyze it from different point of view, and you have to listen to people who disagree with you, because that is how you get to a point in which you understand even your own ideas better. Imagine if I went to an engineering department and told all of these people, well, actually, I don't know anything about this, but you should all shut up and listen to me. That would never happen. In an academic institution, in an academic setting, you have to create a space in which everyone feels welcome to do their job without having to worry about being intimidated, being abused, being bullied. That's not a humane environment.
My hope with the studies that I'm doing about detransition, I'm really hoping to open this conversation. Knowing the different kind of outcomes is what really informs what kind of counseling you can provide to people. And we need to be careful about just saying there's one type and one experience, because, you know, we're hearing that there are many different. So I am hoping that opens up the conversation and destigmatizes these other outcomes.
They don't care if you are somebody who has had issues. If you're a success story, they may want your story so that they can use you as advertising for what they're doing. But if you've had issues, they don't want to hear complaints, because that's a you problem for them. They consider that to be something that is wrong with you. You're not doing it right.
Detransitioners are now faced with another layer beyond the anger that they might have towards people who supported their transition, or anger that they had towards the medical community. They are also left with essentially the same challenge that they had before, which is, how can I accept myself where I am right now?
Social anxiety or interpersonal problems, fears of intimacy and closeness. There's a whole gamut of things that kind of remained unaddressed during the transition process, which are still there, and that's a very important part of the work. I think one of the most difficult things about detransitioning is when people come to realize how much of their life they invested into this whole process, how focused they were on it, how many years they spent altering the way they looked, the way they behaved, the way they talked, taking hormones, having surgeries. In some cases, we're talking about a decade or more. And that's huge, to look back and think, potentially, I've wasted 10 years of my life is, extremely upsetting.
A lot of people are beginning this transition process and they're not getting the right support. They're not getting the right medical treatment. They're not getting the right resources. They're not getting the right information. And then they are coming to a point where they need to either stop transitioning for medical reasons or emotional reasons, or they're just having difficulty. It's like, if you're going to push people in that direction, even if that ends up being a direction that maybe is good for them, they still need support. They still need care. We cannot just take all that care and say, you're good now, you know what to do, because we don't know what to do.
Sometimes if they've gone through medical procedures like testosterone or mastectomy, their bodies are markers of this gender identity exploration they have been through. And if they now pass better as males than they do as females, they now have reverse dysphoria.
I think one of the big ones that I've seen in women who are detransitioning is coming to terms with same-sex attraction. Many of these women are lesbian. And for various reasons felt very conflicted about being a woman who was attracted to other women. And those issues are often still there once they decide to detransition. And, it's a matter of trying to help them deal with whatever the internal issues are, such as shame, homophobia, etc.
If you look at the world at the moment, if you look at like the UK, we've had gay marriage legalized for a few years. We've had vastly on a social level, it looks like being a lesbian's accepted, but it's not. There's definitely this, like, lesbophobia is still incredibly alive.
I've seen story after story of young women who are seeking psychological help in their detransition, and they just keep running into ideological professionals who think they're making a mistake and think that they really need to continue with their transition, and just don't understand how somebody with gender dysphoria couldn't be trans.
There is no way to fully prepare for detransitioning, socially or medically or emotionally. For the younger people who are just coming out as detransitioned and just stopping that process, it's so scary. It's terrifying, because a lot of times everything you thought you knew and everyone you thought supported and loved you has abandoned you.
There's a tremendous challenge in wanting to save face if they are starting to question. And I think a lot of young people who are considering detransition may stay down the path of transition just because they don't want to kind of admit that they were wrong.
I was absolutely terrified that I was going to be so frowned upon. I was so scared that I wasn't going to do anything. I was just going to keep taking the hormones because I didn't want to have that view. I didn't want to have that title. I didn't want to be the person that made everybody do that and then change back.
The young person knows that the parent might say, I told you you shouldn't have done this, or I knew this was a bad idea. I wish you had listened to me. So we have to remember, if we have somebody in our life who we care for, who is identifying as trans or has transitioned, we have to keep in mind that they really need support and compassion at every step of the way.
If you stop, or if you're even thinking about stopping, it does not matter what anybody else's thoughts are. It matters that your health is okay, that you're mentally okay, and that you're doing right for what you need for your future and what you need for your health.
You have to trust yourself and work to learn to love yourself and to love your body and to respect the trauma that you've experienced. You have great strength and great potential for healing.
She calls it radical self-acceptance, and it's something she has to do every day. And she came to a place where she's like, this is my body. This is the only one I have. I am stuck with me for the rest of my life, so I need to find a way to get along with me. She doesn't love her body, but she is learning to accept it. And it's something that she does every day.
You know, for quite a long period of time, these women feel like they're in a kind of no man's land where they're not women, they're not men. People still see them as men because they're bald and they have facial hair. They don't want to be seen as men anymore. How do they go about finding relationships with the body that they have and the kind of hybrid body that they've constructed for themselves? It's very, very difficult. But I want to say that, I've seen people come out the other side of this process, finally being able to be themselves. They kind of come to realize that they don't need any of that stuff, that who they are is enough. It's kind of amazing to see people come to that point.
We have this wealth of community on social media. And if you can make sure you're doing it in a modest way in order to preserve your mental health, because it can get anxious being out there in this vulnerable state, you can find community of detransitioners out there.
She's finding her own path, and I think the most important thing is to allow her time to do it, and recognizing that for her, she might need more time than maybe some other kid who has never gone through this process, because a lot of her teenage years were hijacked by it. And so I think in many ways she's felt like she missed out on the normal teenagehood. And I think allowing space for her to feel that loss is really important. That's just the nature of humans, I think. You process it and you get past it. And at some point she's going to be like, I'm out. I got things to do.